I went through the diagnosis journey and realized that one of the things I had to do was I had to actually undo a lot of internalized ableism, that
Mm.
actually all my overcompensation, right? Being super, you heard the CB, the multiple books, the multiple executive roles, the pushing myself so hard. A lot of it was a kind of internalized ableism, right? Like trying to overcompensate for what I felt were perhaps the ways in which I couldn't show up. And overdoing, over pushing myself. And bit by bit, I began to unmask, to talk more openly about it, to develop like just simple tools without being embarrassed. Like my glasses cases all have air tags because I'm sick of, and my AirPods, because I'm sick of the amount of money because I buy nice glasses that it costs me when I leave my
Yes.
glasses all over the place. So now there's an air tag on it. It will never be lost, and it can even sing to me and tell me where it is, right? So I don't do those things with apology anymore. Now I'm just like, yeah, I'm hella ADHD. And so I'm going to use these tools. And you know what? And I love it because I love the vibrancy, the energy.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of We're Not Okay, a community of healing. I am one of your hosts, Dr. Antija Allen, and today I'm not joined by my co host, Justin Stewart, but don't worry, he's around, he's somewhere. He's giving me a little bit of a break so that we can have this special episode for Women's History Month that is going to focus on Black women with ADHD, one of which being me. And so, as I said to him, he probably wouldn't have gotten a word in anyway. So it's fine that he's not here. But we do miss him, and we are sure that he is listening and watching the episode. I have the pleasure today of being joined by Dr. Loucresie Rupert and Dr. Chinyere Oparah. I'm going to say it again. And Dr. Chinyere Oparah. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Anthea. This is exciting. I'm so happy to be in this space with my sisters.
Thank
Yeah, I'm very
you.
excited for today.
I know that I am because I have been talking about being a late diagnosed woman with ADHD for the past couple years, and some people understand it, and some people who have not had the experience do not at all.
Mhm.
But before we jump in, I want to share the bios of these wonderful, wonderful women with you all. So please bear with me as I go through these. First, we have Dr. Chinyere Oparah is an educator, author, and executive leadership coach who helps visionary leaders navigate systems that were not built for their brilliance. She is the founder of Neurospicy Leaders, a global community supporting ADHD, autistic, and neurodivergent professionals who are leading, creating, and reimagining leadership itself. Drawing on her lived experience with ADHD, trauma informed and executive coaching, training, and more than 30 years of leadership in higher education and nonprofit organizations, including roles as dean, provost, and vice president. Woo, kind of a big deal, right? Uh, Chinyere's work challenges deficit narratives about neurodivergence and advances new models of sustainable, courageous leadership. She is also founder of the Center for Liberated Leadership, where she coaches transformational and non traditional leaders seeking to lead with authenticity, impact, and sustainability. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Atia.
Thank you. And then we have Dr. Loucresie Rupert. She specializes in neurodiversity, ADHD, autism, learning differences, etc., children with trauma, children in foster care who have been adopted, and adults with developmental disabilities. Uh, she completed medical school and adult psychiatry residency at the University of South Alabama. She completed her child and adolescent psychiatry fellowship at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. She currently aids in the fight towards racial, sexual orientation, gender identity, religious, a-religious, disability, and neurodiverse equality through her work as a co-founder of Physician Women SOAR. SOAR standing for Support, Organize, Advocate, Reclaim, an organization of physician women that raises money, awareness, and educates for the aforementioned intersectional causes. Loucresie also serves her community through her participation in BLACK, Black Leaders Acquiring Collective Knowledge. She aims to help empower those with mental health diagnoses and neurodiversity through her company, Insightful Consultant LLC, via speaking engagements, education, and training on a plethora of mental health and diversity related topics. You may have seen Dr. Rupert on the Today Show or the Tamron Hall Show, where she was discussing this very topic of ADHD. So, welcome, 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 Dr. Rupert.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here for Women's History Month.
Thank you. All right. Now that everybody knows how amazing you all are, although I'm sure they have already, because I'm sure they've seen these shows, they've read your books, they've had experience by watching you on different podcasts. Um, I want to jump into this conversation because we have a lot of topics to
Let's
cover,
do it.
and we don't have enough time to get there, but we're going to try. Very, very first thing that I shared was that I was recently diagnosed with ADHD. I always like to tell people, yes, the diagnosis came now, but I knew for a very long time, probably, because I do have a background in psychology.
Mhm.
Um, but with that diagnosis for me came a lot of like reflection on the many years of my life where I did not have a diagnosis, where I did not have a true understanding of my symptoms, what I actually didn't know were symptoms, right? I just this is just how I am. I don't know why people don't get it, right? But also there was a little bit of a grieving period for me of like, okay, what would my life have been had I known? Right? What could have been different? Um, and so I want to talk a little bit about that topic of diagnosis and personal experiences. So let's start with Chinyere.
All right.
And I want to ask you, how has your understanding of ADHD shaped the way you interpret your experiences um, through like your leadership journey and even your career path?
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing your journey, Antija. And I totally
Thank you.
relate. I'm also late diagnosed, like I think many women and pretty much most Black women that I know. We were not seen as the typical ADHD kids. So yeah, we're coming to it late. And so that for me, that means that I navigated a nonprofit career. I navigated an academic career as a faculty member. I navigated a senior academic leadership career. So 3 careers later, very ADHD, by the way, without knowing that I had ADHD, right? And so, like most professionals, I developed workarounds. Like that's what we
Mhm.
do. We're not sitting around thinking there's something wrong with me. I can't do this. We're going to go for it, but we're going to figure out how to work around. So for me, it was things like poor working memory. Right? I never went anywhere. When I was the provost, I always had my little blue notebook. Everybody knew Chinyere was going to show up with it. Everything was going to go in that book. Heaven forbid if I ever lost it or someone got their hands on it, but because that way I could keep myself on track, right?
Mhm.
Time blindness. The first job that I had as a provost was a small women's college, and I had the most amazing EA. Just totally loved her. And she was 100% behind me. One of those women who was just like, I got your back.
Mhm.
And she would come in 2 minutes before every meeting and say, "Hey, don't forget to transition to," right? Because it just was known that my brain would not tell me it's time to stop.
Mhm.
After I was no longer working with her, I had to figure out actually my iPhone can do that job. But I have alarms all day long, like pretty much every 20 to 30 minutes. My phone is telling me what to do. Sometimes I rebel and I'm like, I'm sick of my phone telling me what to do. But I was sharing with both of you before this session. I was so deep in hyper focus preparing this what's going to be an incredible talk for the American College Professionals Association that I totally forgot to eat lunch. And then I'm like, oh wait, it's 3 o'clock. We're going to be talking. Let me grab something. So hyper focus. It's a blessing and a curse, right? I mean, it actually is the secret to, I think, the success for many of us. And I certainly have
Yeah.
found that many books have been birthed during periods of hyperfocus, right? It means that I'm hyperproductive, right? But it also means on the flip side of that, I can get deeply exhausted without knowing that I actually had to go with the sort of the ebb and flow of my surge recover process instead of just trying to be on surge, surge, surge all the time. And unfortunately for me, how that showed up after, maybe many years of executive leadership was in my body, it's the body keeps a score, I think they say, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Um, stage 2 hypertension,
Mm.
pre-diabetes. Like I'm a yogi. I'm super healthy. And yet I'm not, right? Because I was navigating systems that weren't designed for me, right? Burning myself at both ends. And I started my ADHD journey. Bizarrely, somebody who was working on my house just said, "You seem like you might have ADHD," and I was like, "How could you even
What?
say that?" He's like, "Well, my wife's an ADHD coach," and he said, "You just seem like you might have ADHD to me," and I was like, "Well, I don't have a problem with focus. I can focus for hours without needing to stop," and he was like, "Exactly." That's what I had no idea. I thought people with ADHD couldn't focus for 5 minutes, so therefore it couldn't be me.
Mhm.
And so I started that journey. I started going to a support group for folks, adults with ADHD, and just hearing
Mhm.
their stories and relating. Oh, me too, me too, me too. I went through the diagnosis journey and realized that one of the things I had to do was I had to actually undo a lot of internalized ableism. That
Mm.
actually all my overcompensation, right? Being super, you heard the CV, the multiple books, the multiple executive roles, the pushing myself so hard. A lot of it was a kind of internalized ableism, right? Like trying to overcompensate for what I felt were perhaps the ways in which I couldn't show up. And overdoing, over pushing myself. And bit by bit, I began to unmask, to talk more openly about it, to develop like just simple tools without being embarrassed. Like my glasses cases all have air tags because I'm sick of, and my AirPods, because I'm sick of the amount of money, because I buy nice glasses, that it costs me when I leave
Yeah.
my glasses all over the place. So now there's an air tag on it. It will never be lost, and it can even sing to me and tell me where it is, right? So I don't do those things with apology anymore. Now I'm just like, yeah, I'm hella ADHD. And so I'm going to use these tools. And you know what? And I love it because I love the vibrancy, the energy, all of that is also part of my ADHD. And so I have absolutely no regrets. It's definitely a part of who I am today.
Thank you. And one thing that I heard was this idea of having multiple roles. And I remember when I went to the doctor, one of the things he asked me was, "Well, you've been so successful. I can't imagine you having ADHD." And I'm like, "Yeah, I've been successful in a lot of things. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I've had a
A
lot
lot
of
of
jobs."
changes, a lot of
Yeah,
switches.
exactly. And
Girl, let
so,
me tell you, I have a faculty job. So I teach leadership and sociology. I run the Center for Liberated Leadership. You heard that, right? I
mhm.
run and also coach with neurospicy leaders, right? And I take groups of Black women to Tanzania in the summer,
Oh, nice.
and support a women's micro enterprise project over there. And I don't know, I feel like I've missed something, but of course, I'm parenting my teen. So yeah, like we do a lot of things. Like that's part of like our brilliance, and
Yeah.
I love that.
I might need more information about the Tanzania
Sure
trip.
thing.
Today's episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Here at We're Not Okay, a community of healing, we've built a space where individuals can come together to process grief, manage stress, and share truths that are often carried in silence. Now, healing isn't only about conversation, it's also about getting the right support when you need it most.
That's where BetterHelp comes in. They connect you with licensed therapists online, anytime, anywhere. So you can get guided help from an expert in a supportive space you can trust. Therapy isn't just for the hard moments, it's also a tool for personal growth and development. And one of the best features of BetterHelp is that if you don't feel like that first therapist is the right fit, you can easily switch to a therapist that you truly connect with.
With over 7,000 reviews and a 4.5-star rating on Trustpilot, BetterHelp is a platform that you can rely on. It's something that you can trust. So visit betterhelp.com/the not okay pod. Again, but it's going to be down here too. Betterhelp.com/the not okay pod. And with that, you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy. Because just like this community, you don't have to work through life's challenges alone.
That is interesting. And I wonder, Lucretie, do you have a similar path, or has your path been slightly different?
So if you've heard me talk, you've heard me tell my diagnosis story before, but I like to repeat it. I was actually in medical school and we were learning about ADHD. And when you're in medical school, when you learn about stuff, there's the joke that like you have everything you learn about, right? Because you're like,
Hmm.
oh. So I was like, okay, so do I have ADHD where I'm doing the medical student thing? I'm pretty sure I have ADHD though. And I actually went and tried to get diagnosed when I was in medical school. I saw an older white male psychologist who did my testing. And he verbally told me that he did not think I had ADHD, but didn't really go into any details of what he thought was going on. So, of course, being in medical school, I asked for my records and saw that he had put in my records that he thought that I had narcissistic personality disorder because I thought I could do great things like be in medical school, which I was like in medical school passing. And that basically I struggled because I mean he basically said I just wasn't smart enough to be in medical school. And I was narcissistic to think I could be there. So didn't actually get officially diagnosed in medical school. In residency, I just struggled. I never struggled with like patient care, anything like that. I struggled with notes. Getting my notes in on time, having my thoughts organized to present to the attending, um, getting notes in on time. Getting notes in, but why they could still bill for it. And the disorganization or things like that were the only non-positive or things I needed to correct or whatever kind of recommendations I got throughout medical school and residency. And as an intern, I decided to go get tested again. And I went and got tested and was diagnosed with ADHD. And I remember one of the attendings that I worked with actually at the time, it used to be, I don't know why, to be honest, but a lot of psychiatrists in the past believe that you outgrew ADHD as an adult.
Hmm.
Or so I remember him saying, I didn't believe in adult ADHD until I met you. And I was like, I don't really know how to take that, but
I was
okay.
just about to ask. They're like,
I mean, he gave me
I
good
know, is that a
evaluations,
compliment?
so
I
I
don't know
think
how
it
to
was
take
just
that.
like I see it, like firsthand. And again, I was in psychiatry residency, and I worked with all psychiatrists, and none of them were surprised at this diagnosis, right? Like, so. But I do remember the first physician that I went to get treated. I remember her being like, "Do you know how smart you had to be to make it through medical school without being diagnosed and without being medicated?" And like I really sat with that because I do remember in medical school, the way my medical school was set up then, the first 2 years was like all the book learning, right? All the classes, A&P, going to the lab. The second 2 years was all the patient clinical interactions and rotations. The first 2 years, I really struggled because my workaround in grade school and college was making note cards. Well, you
mm,
get like a semester's worth of information every month in medical school. You can't make note cards for all of that. So like my, workaround was not able to be a workaround anymore. So I really struggled the first 2 years. I mean, I passed, I did decent, but I really, really struggled. I studied more than most of the people I knew in medical school and like really struggled the first 2 years. Patient interaction, because a lot of people with ADHD learn very well with hands-on. So since that was hands-on, that was fine.
mm,
But anyway, I remember at a point in medical school of being like, maybe I did fool everybody. Like maybe I'm not really smart and like I don't know, but I like struggle so bad. Maybe I did really fool everybody. So when I heard that from her, I was like, oh. That was hard, and it's not that I'm stupid. And I don't like using the word stupid, but I mean, when you read in your report that this person is narcissistic because they're really just not smart enough to be in medical school, I mean, I definitely had thoughts and feelings about that. So also late diagnosed and also kind of a racist journey to get there, because we know that was racism, right?
yeah,
But a racist
absolutely.
journey to get there. So that's my story.
One thing that you brought up was, that idea of having success, right?
Mhm.
Um, and also, both of you actually shared this, all these workarounds that we create for ourselves that we don't actually know are workarounds though, right? And I think that's
Right.
another part of it. Like once you get diagnosed, you're like, that's why I have 67 alarms,
Mhm.
right? That's why I have to, maybe read something several times. Because guess how many times have you watched the show, paused it, had to pause it, and then go back to, and then you had
Rewind
to
it 10
rewind it?
times because you're like, oh, I
Oh
missed it
my
again.
goodness. Yes, because I was like, how did I do that part again? Because now I started doing something else. Um, but once you find out about the diagnosis and you find out about the symptoms, you're like, wow, there were a lot of things I was really doing
Mhm.
just to do what neurotypical people are able to do without all these other things.
Right.
right?
Body
So,
doubling was a big one for me. Like, if you're in any kind of neurodiverse group or organization, you hear about body doubling. So before that was like a named thing, like in
mhm.
high school and college and all of that, I had study groups all the time. And I was creating, I mean, like I created a nonprofit while I was in college. But when I was
Wow.
creating things, I mean, yeah, anyway. I did create a nonprofit when I was in college working with teenage girls. But it didn't last very long. But again, I was in college and then went to medical school. But the point is when I was creating all these things, I always had somebody creating things with me because it's easier for me to do things with somebody. So then after I got like in medical, in college, medical school, anything that's educational, it's really easy to have study groups. But then once you get to like real life and I'm trying to start my business or do this or do that, and I have to do it on my own, I was really struggling. And that's what made me realize. Then I heard about body doubling, and I was like, oh, it's because I did body doubling basically all my life that I was able to do all of these things. It just wasn't a named, accommodation back then.
Yeah, I
You know
love
what you
that.
just go, no, go ahead, go ahead.
No, I was going to say I love that because one of the things that I created was a body doubling community called the Focus Cafe, precisely because I needed it, and then other people needed it. And the funny thing is, get this, I didn't create it as an ADHD thing. I just was like, doesn't everybody need somebody else to be in the room so they can get stuff done?
Yeah.
And then it was like, no, actually, half of my clients don't need it at all. And then the third, actually, probably more like a third that do. I'm like, oh, wait, you're all kind of a little bit neurocurious, as they call it, right? On the journey. So, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
Oh my goodness. And now y'all are making me think, is that why I have a podcast with another person?
Yes, it is. It's a we
Yeah,
thing. My
I just
motto
thought about
throughout
this
my whole
so
career has been
often.
it's a we thing, right?
Oh my
Because we do it better
gosh.
together.
Yes,
Oh my
yes.
gosh. And it also just made me think we actually just did a TEDx talk together because I was like, I want to do a TED talk. Hey, do you want to do a TED talk with me? Like, like all of these different things, the speaking engagements together. Oh, y'all are opening my eyes more now. Oh, I have to
But
reflect
Antia,
on
let
this
me add one
after.
more layer. Let me add one layer. Let me add the cultural layer. The cultural
Yeah.
layer is this, right? That Ubuntu, that phrase, that philosophy that says that I am because we are, right? So from an
Mhm.
Mhm.
African perspective, this is actually natural culturally to who we are. And so
Mhm.
again, it's only that the individualistic, I should do it on my own, is a very Western narrative anyway.
Yeah.
So we could just release that and do this
Yeah.
more collective way of thinking and doing and being and working.
Yeah, definitely. One of my spills I used to give my patients and parents was, ADHD, we need a lot of accommodation in this society. But the
Mm.
things that ADHD, the positive sides, not that we don't struggle, because I definitely struggle at times, but the positive sides of being able to focus on multiple things at one time, being creative, being able to think outside of the box. In a hunter-gatherer society, that's a very positive thing, which is why we
Mm.
still have so much ADHD because it was a positive selection thing. And then it's very recent history for humans to have this I need to sit in school or sit at a job and sit at a desk 8 hours a day, where it's no longer a positive thing to be able to, listen out for the protection of the kids while hunting, while gathering, right, whatever. So I
Mhm.
mean, like, yeah, we need accommodations for the society that we are in. And that's why it is considered a disorder, but also, more people are moving towards neurodiversity, not just calling it a disorder, but the neurodiversity and just learning to work with what you have.
Yeah. And that actually leads to my next question. Challenging, it's almost like we planned it. Challenging that deficit narrative, right? So, of course, we for sure know. We just listed a whole bunch of different symptoms that we have that we try to figure out like how can we cope with these? How can we manage these, right? But we have so many strengths as well, and some of these already came up, like that idea of hyper focus and being able to write a book because think of my dissertation. I remember my dissertation advisor was like, there's no way you can have this done because you only have this many months to finish it. And I was like, what? Watch me do it. And I don't know what it was. I was up to 6 a.m., like literally for the night before 6 a.m. And I got that done. So I'm like, there are some
Mhm.
strengths and some real positives to having ADHD. And so I want to hear a little bit more about that. What do you see, as these strengths? And even when you in your work that you're doing, like how do you, support others so that they can also see these strengths? Because we do hear many times about, the deficits that are involved with having ADHD. And
You
I'll
know what?
take it from either of you. to start?
Okay, I'm going to jump in. Well, listen, let's first just start with the name. Like we all say ADHD, AD, but attention deficit hyperactivity
Mm.
disorder. How many conditions have two negatives, right?
Right.
So I love the term neurospicy because to me
Mhm.
it pushes back against that deficit and disorder. Also, my family's Nigerian and I love jollof rice, which is like super spicy. And the thing about jollof rice is that jollof rice compared to white rice, right? It's got all
Mhm.
these different flavors from all the spices, and then it's
Mhm.
got a little bit of kick to it. It's got a little bit of heat, kind of catches you off, a little bit of surprise, you know? So, it kind of just livens up your day when you eat your plate of jollof rice instead of your white rice. So let's just like say that maybe neurodivergent is to, what is it? Is to white rice. What is it? Neurodivergent is to neurotypical, what jollof is to white rice.
Yeah,
I
more
like that.
flavor.
So, so that's kind of like just like let's just play with these things a little bit. Let's not
Mhm.
kind of go around looking so kind of downtrodden and like, oh, I have a deficit and a disorder. Poor woe is me, you know?
Mhm.
And I think that late diagnosed leaders with ADHD and autism actually and or ADHD, right, which is a combo of both, we are really challenging the impairment model of neurodivergence, right? Because just like both of you, I had an experience with my psychiatrist who was doing my evaluation who said to me, you clearly have the ADHD neurotype, but it would be hard for me to diagnose you as having ADHD because you're just too successful, right? So
Yeah.
this
Which
idea
is
that
weird because
ADHD,
as a psychiatrist, that's not actually a qualification anywhere. There's no qualification that says if they're really successful, they don't have ADHD. So I'm
right?
not sure why so many psychiatrists think that, but
Exactly, because there's this narrative about sure you have to have impairment in certain areas of life, right? And so
Mhm.
right.
impairment then is translated to therefore you can't be successful, as opposed to this is challenging, and so this is what I do about it, right? That
Mhm.
can also be an impairment. But that idea, that word impairment, is part of as I understand it, and I'm going to defer to you, Loucresie, but I think it's part of the
Yeah.
DSM-5 criteria, and so that's where people get hung up, right? Um,
Mhm.
but considering ADHD and autism to be deficits or disorders just demonstrates such an enormous amount of neuronormative bias, right? Because it really ignores the ways in which, and I'm thinking about ADHD and autism here. Like
Mhm.
those are both types of brain that are absolutely brilliant for certain things, right? Wired for creativity, like you said, wired for outside the box thinking, wired for seeing unusual patterns that other people can't see, wired for
Mhm.
brilliance, energy, right? So
Mhm.
there's a reason why, for example, so many tech, biotech, medical research companies have many
Scanners.
neurodivergent employees, right? Because they
Mhm.
need that innovation and they know where to go to find it. Neurodivergent brains literally see patterns and possibilities that neurotypical brains will never see. Isn't that amazing? So that's why the
Mhm.
corporate sector is now talking about things like neurodivergent innovation and the neurodivergent advantage. The neurodivergent advantage is what companies get from having neurodivergent staff and leaders,
Mhm.
right? So it's time for us to really flip this thing around and just say, the way it was developed was really based on this medical model that had to have a series of impairments in order to justify treatment. But
Mhm.
that does not capture our experience and our identity. And it's time for us to put it to rest and to think differently about who we are.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. One thing, I think we all talked about a lot of the positives, but one thing specific, like to me, that I enjoy actually about being ADHD, and I'm ADHD too, autistic as well. But as a child psychiatrist, when I get these parents who are like, my child can't be ADHD because they're smart and they make A's, and I'm like, oh, but I'm ADHD. Are you saying I'm not smart? And they have not, they're like, okay. So I think it's just good for one, the patients to see like you can still do what you need to do in life, but also it gives parents like some, I guess, real life experience. Like their psychiatrist has ADHD, and I can say like, they can see that okay, my kid is still gonna be able to be okay, all of those things, and kind of maybe take away some of that fear just by the fact that I'm the one in the room diagnosing them. So I find that as a positive.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think it goes back to that thought of like, guess what? Representation matters in all
Mhm.
spaces, in all ways, right? If we're able to see people who are successful individuals, such as ourselves, right? Who are, sorry, who are out here doing amazing things and have been doing amazing things, than others who probably are listening or watching who are like me, watch those reels on Instagram and go, yep, that's me. Yeah, that's me, right? Like it might be you, and it's okay, right? Find out, get your diagnosis, and learn a little bit more about, what truly is happening within you and outside of you and your experiences. So one thing that I have to talk about, and this came up a little bit already, Creasy, when you mentioned these are the accommodations we need for this culture, for this society, right? How do we navigate many of these systems that truly were just not built for us, like really not built for us? I think even when I'm in meetings, and now again, reflection, I'm like, oh, that's why I was like that. I've been in meetings and sat there and got frustrated because I'm like, why don't we just get to the point? What is some or another thing is, somebody should say this. Why is not nobody saying this thing that needs to be said? And then I feel like I have to be the person who says it because nobody else is gonna say it, which also gets you into trouble because you were the only person that said it, right? I don't know if y'all have had that experience, but I'm always thinking like I think that the situation doesn't feel normal. That's usually how
Mhm.
I feel in the moment. Like, this does not seem normal. I can't be the only one that feels this way. And now I know I'm not the only one that feels this way. So again, what are your thoughts on navigating these systems that are just not built for us?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think coming up with workarounds, but with intention. So a lot of times we do that naturally, right? But like I was talking about the body doubling and like, oh, well, that's why I did well in grade school and college. So as an
Mm-hmm.
adult, I'm like, I still need that. So I intend now I have to do it with intention because I'm not in an education thing where it's like normal to have study groups, right? So now I have to reach out to people who also need body doubles, and I'm like, okay, this week I need, if anybody wants a body double today, I have this time or whatever. So I have to be intentional about my workarounds, even though some of them were kind of developed naturally without thinking about it as you go through life in different changes. Of course, medication can be an accommodation, but there are people who my kind of sense on medication is if you can if you don't want to be on medication and you can accommodate things in a way that does not cause you to either harm yourself or others, which includes self-esteem, especially for like my kids in school. I'm like, I'm not gonna make them struggle so much to make an A that their self-esteem suffers. Like, with the parents, we need to have a conversation about that. You know what I'm saying? But if you can do all that and do well without medications, I'm not one of those physicians that, oh, you have to be on medicine, whatever. But if you can discover those accommodations that you need in a way that really impacts across situations. So a lot of people might do really well. An example with most late diagnosed ADHD people, or a lot of them, is we do really well in school, right? That's why we're late diagnosed because nobody thinks you have it because you're doing well in school.
Yeah.
But then the rest of your life might be falling apart. I remember one time in school, I think I was either in college or medical school. I don't remember. But I came home and my lights were cut off, not because I didn't have the money to pay the bill, just because I simply forgot to pay it 2 months ago. So yeah, I was making good grades in school and coming home to my lights cut off. So, it's you have to look at all of those things, and then, auto pay became a thing. And so that's a workaround that keeps my lights on in my house because it's just automatically done.
A workaround I have discovered as well.
Yes.
Auto pay is our friend. Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that we're talking about ADHD in the workplace because this is like really important. And to me, I think there's two different pieces to it. And when I started Neurospicy Leaders, I started with the first piece, which is that I need to create, tools and coaching to support neurodivergent leaders and professionals in the workplace so they can survive, be successful, not be dragged down by all of the pressures on them, right? And so I started with the individual, and that's really powerful. We do really well. We're we people.
Mhm.
We do really, really well with leadership, executive coaching, workplace coaching, all of that. And so we do that work. But then I started pivoting to adding this other layer, which is to help the organizations
Right.
where people with ADHD, autism, etc., are working to become places where diverse thinking styles can be affirmed and celebrated. And not just used as a source of innovation and creativity, and then the person is treated badly, right? But
Mhm.
actually, that then there's that support, the structure, the infrastructure, and the culture supports neurodivergent ways of thinking and being. And so to me, that's the two-prong piece, right? Is that we have to
Mhm.
start with ourselves. Of course, we need the tools, we need the workarounds. Sometimes we're struggling, it's hard, like we need that support. But then we have to, I think the next frontier then is that all workplaces should be places where people with diverse thinking styles and different types of brains can thrive, right? And so, when I think about the people who come to talk to me and need coaching, it typically is like three different situations. Like one is somebody in a senior leadership role, right? Or maybe recently promoted, right? But they're finding that they're drowning in email and what I call administrivia, right? They're so overwhelmed and their self-esteem is so low because they've got 3,000 emails in their inbox that they're hiding and they feel bad,
Mhm.
right? And then the creative and strategic, which they're brilliant at, which is why they got the promotion or the job in the first place, they're hardly having any time to do it, right? Because they're just fighting fires. So that's one. Then I think the second type is folks who come in because they're actually blocked from getting that promotion. They've been told you're brilliant. We really appreciate you, everything you've done. They've done these amazing projects, but there's these expectations of leadership that just go against the way their brains work, right? Like, for example, well, you have to sit for 3 hours in cabinet meeting, and then you have to speak appropriately in certain moments and look like you knew what the last person said and you didn't drift off. Or not call BS because you're also autistic and now you just want to tell the truth, right? And telling the truth, that's actually not okay. It's not professionally okay, right? At the level at which autistic people see the truth and tell the truth, right?
Mhm.
And so, we need to so they need to like figure out ways to manage their surge recovery cycle so they don't crash and they don't, right? But also manage their communication style and their engagement, right? So there's that piece. And I think the third one is just pure burnout. People who've had a lifetime of masking for us is not just about masking our neurodivergence, is it? It's also we have to like show up and like deal with the fact that maybe we're getting these microaggressions or these little like low grade, comments. Like I had this boss once that would always say, "Well, you're just so intimidating."
Mhm.
And that's like, why? Because I'm black, I'm female, and highly successful and good at what I do. So like we're navigating all of that and we're masking how irritating it is. So it's like it's exhausting. Plus all the overcompensation I talked about, plus pushing through these environments that are just not made for us. And so we're exhausted, like we're beyond exhausted. And so those are the sort of three reasons why I see people come through the door. And each situation needs a different kind of set of solutions. But honestly, the first one is just to look at what are the narratives we're telling ourselves about ourselves. How are we shaming ourselves? And I'm always trying to just normalize. Oh, so you're like, oh yeah, I did that. Stayed up like all night doing this thing again, and then so I'm like, okay, so seems like your rhythm is that you have a lot of energy surge at this time, and then you don't at this time. So how could you reorganize your week so that you're doing your brilliant strategic work at that time? And it's like going with their brain instead of like
Mhm.
shaming ourselves for it. So that I think that's key. And that's the last thing I'll say about this is that I also think there's a lot of trauma related to neurodivergence, right? That
Mhm.
sometimes even our loved ones have believed and maybe continue to believe that we should be different, right? And if you've experienced that since a kid all the way through, on top of racial trauma, gender trauma, like violence, things that we've experienced, we're carrying a lot of layers, and all of that needs to be treated very, I think, gently because it's going to come up, I think, when we start unmasking, when we start really looking at what is our body carrying. It's all of that is in there. But there is hope, with neurodiversity, affirming coaching, we really can adopt systems that work for us and
Mhm.
heal those wounds, I think, and just really be in a place like I feel like today I'm in a place where my ADHD kind of glitches, like the brain forgets, like all that stuff, doesn't really bother me anymore. I've got systems that work around that. I have a rhythm in my life that allows me to be like super high energy creative sometime and just like low key other time. And all of my kind of ADHD gifts, I think, are coming to the fore because I've created a life that works for me. So it is possible, and I want people listening to not feel like they're stuck, right? That it is really possible to get the support you need to live your best life and to do what you're brilliantly gifted to do.
Yeah. And I just want to co-sign, especially organizational support, like when the organization um, is accommodating. Because again, I've talked about notes are my weak point, right? Getting notes in on time. And I remember I was talking to one of like my immediate clinical supervisor at one of my jobs about my notes. And I've been pretty open about the fact that I have ADHD. So they knew I had ADHD and they were like, well, maybe we could get you a scribe as an accommodation for your ADHD. Because at this job, you could ask for a scribe, but they would make you pay a certain part of it. But they were like, since you have ADHD, we could get this as an accommodation where you don't have to pay any of it. And I was like, even as a psychiatrist who asked for accommodation for my when I say my kids, I'm normally talking about my patients. I call my patients my kids. But my kids and all those things all the time, I honestly didn't even think about it. Like, oh, I could ask for accommodation for myself. And I was like, oh, that would be so helpful. And then I had a scribe and my notes were done on time. Like, look at that. So really, when the organization is supportive, it's definitely just a relief and a load off your back of trying to figure out all the things you need to do. And I mean, you can figure out individual workarounds, right? Like we have to do that. But when you don't have to do that, it definitely decreases, burnout and the trauma of just living in a world that is constantly a microaggression, especially like she said for Black women, but it's constantly a microaggression on so many fronts. When you're neurodiverse, you're Black, you're, a woman. Don't add if you're LGBTQ or, especially trans, just all of the things. So if we could
Yeah.
take away some of those microaggressions, that decreases just our trauma in general, which of course is going to help you be healthier and happier and all of those things.
Absolutely. Of course, y'all have said so many things. I'm like, my brain's going, because I have ADHD. And the accommodations piece, I think is so important. So I'm so glad that both of you, brought that up in kind of different ways. There is, I think there are so many people, and I saw this as a faculty member myself, where I would have students who they would wait until they failed the exam to say, well, I have ADHD. I needed some more time. And it's like, well, I needed to know that before the exam. Right. But many people, and it goes back to the idea of stigma, right? Many people just don't feel comfortable sharing that they have a particular disorder, even though it's documented, even though, like they have said this is true, you have this, and there are accommodations that you can receive. They don't want to be the person who's staying there extra time. They don't want to be the one who took the test in the testing center instead of in the class of everybody else, right? Like there's a stigma still so much associated with it that causes people to struggle when they really don't have to. Um, and so thinking about that from the student perspective, but also thinking about that from the employee perspective, like if there are supports in place that you absolutely have the right to receive. I absolutely myself recently, once I found out, I was like, should I get accommodations? I guess I should get accommodations. And even I was in again, like I didn't feel super comfortable asking for them. And I think that even once I asked for them, I think there was some confusion on people's faces because they're like, well, she's getting the work done. What does she need accommodations for? Because for me to get this work done, going back to the idea of burnout, I am exhausted to get this work done, right? I'm exhausted. It takes so much more of my energy than probably someone else who is doing this. Um, and especially thinking about those new leaders, I actually ended up getting diagnosed once I moved into a new leadership role because I was the one with the inbox that was like, that's a lot of emails. I can't respond to everybody. And now I'm up at 2 a.m. scheduling, sending emails, responses because there's just too much. And I felt like, okay, this is the time where I really do need to seek out some sort of support. And so yes, I did go the medication route, but that's a whole nother episode to talk about medications being on back order and you really need them. And people are like, oh, it'll be the next week. No big deal. Like, yes,
But let
big
me let
deal.
me say something about the accommodation piece. I don't want to lose sight of that.
Oh, yes,
So
go ahead.
I have to say, I do think that it's time for us to shift the conversation from accommodations to neuro-inclusive design.
Mm.
From accommodations to neuro-inclusive design, right? So if we are needing accommodation, is because we have neurotypical design that is not affirming or supportive to neurodivergent brains. However, my experience is that when we have neuro-inclusive design, it works for everybody, including neurotypicals. And in fact, half the neurotypicals aren't neurotypical. They just don't know yet. So, so, so for example, just as a little example of my teaching job, right? So I teach college. Um, and one of the things I never do, and I haven't done that since very early in my teaching career, is I don't set final exams. I have final projects that have multiple tasks that you do, a literature review, you do an annotated bibliography, you do this, you do that. It builds up, and finally you've got a final project. You need to turn that in, right? So everything is incremental, and nothing is a final exam. The reason I do that is because I know that many college students, and this is way before the pandemic, experience anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress, and a hugely pressureful 2 weeks packed with final exams is basically a stress bomb that is designed to crash any student with anxiety or depression, right? You couldn't design it better. Like put all the pressure in like 2 weeks and then tell them go. And so I won't do it. And so I've designed a neuro-inclusive semester. I did that years before I even knew I had ADHD, right? Just based on watching my students. And I realized I had one year where I did an experiment. I redid my grade. I took out the final exam, which I had done. I took out the grade and I recalculated all their grades without the final exam to see if it would make a difference. The
Yeah.
only difference it made was that I had a couple of students that had like a brain fog and flunked the exam even though they were brilliant,
Mm.
and their grade came massively down. That was the only difference. It didn't test, it didn't change anything else in terms of my assessment of their capability, right? So that's just
Mhm.
an example. So we could translate that into the workplace. Let's think about, and again, this is the work that we do at Neurospicy Leaders, is that we have, organizational partnerships where we work with a whole organization, whether it's a company, whether it's a department, and we work with them to figure out what would it look like to have systems and meetings and structures that actually helped everybody to thrive instead of asking your ADHD person to ask for special accommodation for this because this 3 hour boring meeting which nobody loves, right, is hard to get through. It's like, why are we doing that, right? Maybe there's a better way for everybody.
Agreed. We have retreats at my job. And whenever they say retreat, people go, which is not what you usually think about with a retreat, right? Because retreat is code for all day meeting, like literally like 8 hour meeting. We're going to have lunch during the retreat. No, that's the only time you get a break during the 8 hour meeting. And then for me, one thing I didn't talk about was like a little bit of like that overstimulation you get sometimes, where I'm like,
Mhm.
when it's time for the break, people want to sit and talk during. I'm like, I need to not be around anyone right now because we've been in here for 4 hours and we're going to be in for another 4 hours. So yes, yes, and again, I don't think I'm the only one, as you mentioned, who would really benefit from having either a real retreat or a much, much shorter, productive.
Yeah,
Right.
Yes, that
that's
idea
exactly what
of
neuro-inclusive design looks like. Like if you're having a retreat, then you retreat. The part of the retreat is like you're walking in the redwoods. You're thinking about you're having alternative spaces which actually foster creativity and innovative thinking. You're not just sitting in the same old meeting room that you normally have for 8 hours. Absolutely, right? Yeah.
Mhm. Oh my gosh. I know I'm in pain right now because we're about done with our time. But before you both go, I do have one last question for you. And I didn't send this one in advance, and I promise it's an easy one. And that's why I didn't send it in advance to anyone because it is in the midst of it all, right? When you are helping people navigate these systems, when you are reframing the way that they think about themselves, right? When you are doing all the workarounds or burning yourself out, right? There's so many all these things that are going on. I would like to know for each of you, what brings you joy?
Um, my community, everyone that knows me, knows that I build community and I have different communities, but definitely just in general, my communities bring me joy. Um, yeah.
I think for me, it's hope and possibility, right? When I'm working with neurospicy leaders or neurodivergent leaders, I get to see them go from this sense of just like solo survival and just grinding through to suddenly realize, oh, I can create a life that actually works for me. I don't have to do this on my own, right? I can celebrate who I am and all of my gifts, and I can build community with other people who experience some of the same things I do, right? And so they get to see that we don't have to just survive neurotypical systems. We can actually transform them. And that starts with our own lives. And that gives me hope, and that gives me a lot of joy knowing that, we are together able to do something different, live differently, and create a different type of world for everybody that will actually help us all to be more human.
I love that question. Every time I ask that question, I can't stop smiling. My face hurts. So I'm like, listen to y'all. And of course, you both included the word community. And now I'm thinking, is this a body doubling thing? Is that why that was what's happening
There's
here?
I'm sorry. There's a running joke with me. So when I was a kid, like in elementary, I would start a club and of course make myself the president of the club because I'm the one who started it, right? But there's a joke that I still do that, right? Like I have this community and that community, they're like, you're just still starting clubs like you're in elementary. Like
And there's a need because I'm sure there's people joining, right? Just like the Focus Cafe. Is that what it was called?
The Focus Cafe,
The
yeah, through
Focus
Neurospicy
Cafe.
Leaders.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. It has been a pleasure for those who are listening, for those who are watching. We have Dr. Rupert, we have Dr. Oparah, and we have had what I think has been a very therapeutic conversation for myself, very informative, extremely eye-opening, and I hope it's been the same for you all who are listening and who are watching. Thank you both for your time, for your vulnerability, for your joy, and for sharing yourselves not only with our community but with your own communities and with our larger community, of course.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. I totally love you guys. We have to stay connected.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.